All right, so all of the suspension has been removed. And I have cut out one shock tower. And I have cut the subframe, but I left behind the very top rail because it leaves a flange that I believe will set right on top of the new frame rails of the Explorer chassis. Maybe wrong, may have to cut it out, but I didn't want to cut out good metal just yet. Plus it's keeping this whole thing square. Oh, sorry, the battery went a bit dead. So I'm about to cut out the second shock tower. I've already put a slice in the edge of this frame rail on this side all the way down to that back corner. I'm probably going to cut that corner out too, but I don't know yet. So I thought before I hacked this out completely, I've cut along the top edge of this as well to leave that flange all the way back and down. So basically all that will be gone. This shock tower is the next thing to dice up, and I thought I would try to get that on film. I'm following where the factory body weld marks are, because I'm gonna weld in an inner panel there, obviously for the inner fender well, and I like to look as clean as possible, so I'm trying to cut it on the factory weld. So put this on time lapse and go ahead and dice out this shock tower and cut this piece of frame out. In case somebody else wants to attempt to cut a shock tower out of a Ford, I cut, like I mentioned earlier, along the factory weld. Tricky part is in here. This big piece of steel, stamped steel, is welded along here a little bit, and here, down in here. Really hard to get to. I ended up trimming this lip. You can see this used to come across higher. Cut this down across here, then I was able to get at the welds and cut them. The inside, there's a welded lip here I just cut through. There's a few beads across the bottom that I cut through. You can see, rather than drilling these out, I went ahead and just sliced across here. And then this bracket is surprisingly difficult to get all the way across cut. I had to do it from the outside once I got the top done. So now it should just basically pull out. Some little something hanging it up. Let's go see what it is. Oh, just a little piece of metal right there. See if I can zing that off while holding a camera. Alright, obviously that did it. So then all I have left to do here is remove this lower section of frame, and then we're going to roll the chassis under and make some indications as to where we're going to cut. Try that. All right, so the chassis is rolled underneath the car. We cut the front subframe out and rolled the chassis underneath it. It is level. It is centered side to side. I earlier, before I took everything apart, put a mark up here for the center line of the front axle, so I can drop a plumb off this to make sure it's dead centered above the half shaft in this case. So now, obviously, the body needs to get dropped on it, but I have not done all the cutting in the body yet. So the plan, and I hope it's good, is to come underneath it. I've got a piece of magnetic bar, Harbor Freight tool holder, and if I stick it to the frame and extend it up, then I know where I need to cut. Now back here, it follows the original frame rail wonderfully. So if I just cut the entire original frame out and everything in between, I know we're good. But when we get up underneath it more, you can see that I don't, you know, I can cut the whole frame of it. I'm just going to extend this bar up to the floor and mark it. Let me try that here. See if I can show it. Kind of came across this on accident, but okay, so this bar is stuck to the frame magnetically. I push it up against the floor and put a mark on the inside. See it or not, but anyway, there's a mark there, tells me that's where I need to cut. So if I just move this thing along the frame, making marks, I will have a template of how this frame fits in this body, and we can cut. So anyway, that's the plan. I'm going to cut everything out until there's a gaping hole, lower the body over this frame, decide what kind of ride height we want, and how much of this frame sticking up through the floorboards we can live with. We will probably compromise the live with inside the car for proper stance. So yeah, that's where we're at. We'll see how it goes from here. Alright, so the bottom of the car is marked with the magnet and the Sharpie, and I went from the bottom and drilled holes every so often through from the bottom on my marks. That way I could transfer the lines to the top side, because I do not really want to cut from underneath and have everything falling in my face. So I've drilled holes. I used a flexible piece of poster board to line the holes up and mark them with welding chalk, and then I will cut through. I did one side already. Cuts very easily. Thin sheet metal, not to mention the rusted. So that's where we're at. I'm going to cut through this side, and I'm probably going to cut across the back of this where there's some support and take just the driver and footwells out in one section and see how much this thing moves. I'm almost certainly going to have to brace the car before I take too much out. We'll see. All right, well, due to concerns about noise with the neighborhood, the project got moved indoors a little earlier than I was wanting to, but it was 108 yesterday, so probably best that I work indoors where there's some shade. I've successfully cut the main floor out, and the alignment with the frame looks pretty good. It's just a rough cut. I left in this brace across the back seat. Don't know if I can continue to leave it in, but I'd like to. The rear portion is a major cutout Most of the frame rails completely are being removed from the trunk area all the way to the back half of this. So that has been cut. Everything except going across here. And as I suspected, this body's going to move a little bit. So when I got to cutting the last little bit here, it was pinching the saw blade, which kind of tells me the body's being squeezed. You can kind of see the seam being pinched there. So before I made any final last cuts and took this piece out, we went ahead and welded in this brace to keep that position. So I am basically at the point where I need to get under it and use a torch to cut the rest of the frame rail through. I can't reach it with a circular saw, can't reach it with the Sawzall. Gonna have to cut it with a torch. And then I can cut that last portion out where the rear seat meets the floor. Don't know if I can show it or not, but, well, not really. That's the portion that needs to be cut. The frame rail from this point back is going to be all completely cut out. So that's going to take the torch. So that's what's next. All right, the last piece of floor is out. Got the trunk section cut out. The frame should fit up through that. The whole entire rear subframe rails are gone. Added a brace here that I talked about last time, and left the rear seat brace in place to kind of keep things in place. I don't know if it's going to be able to stay or not, but it is all cut out and ready to start lowering the body on the frame. Surely there'll be some things that need to be trimmed some more, and then we can start playing with ride height.